Is Israel trying to sabotage the negotiations with Hamas for an exchange of hostages for terrorists? And was that the goal of the recent assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran? Well, if you ask mainstream media, it seems very much like that is the case. There's mainstream media in at least in the UK and in the US, the ones we follow here. Uh, yeah, it's almost difficult to believe that this is how they would report less than a year after Ismail Haniyeh, his organization that he was leading until a few days ago, committed the slaughter of October 7th, that even the most pro-Palestinian journalists cannot pretend like they didn't see it because it was live streamed to the world in true Palestinian fashion. So this guy being taken out of the picture is apparently Israel sabotaging things. He was described as a moderate. We'll get into all the ways he was described by the media and how that fits into whatever how that fits into actually telling us what the news is for one, and yeah, what we should understand from that about what the media is and you know what kind of caution we should take when reading the news. Welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Marco, Richard, and Michael. Michael, your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a little bit like doing a piece on Adolf Eichmann and saying, well, he's not as bad as Hitler. He's actually moderate. And so, he's the guy we need to kind of concentrate on. And we're not going to worry about relativism or anything. We're just going to pretend like he's the only choice we've got because there are far worse choices. It's just I just don't know where the media intends to go with all this. The several reports that this guy was taken out, which is, by the way, part of the original plan from October 7th. I mean, Netanyahu announced October 7th and 8th that all leadership of Hamas was now going to be put under the gun, literally, and they were going to be taken out in due time. And they had obviously had very good intel on where this guy was going to be. It appears that a bomb was placed in the apartment, and he was in Tehran, in fact, another terrible place in the world, and he was taken out. So I think that Israel needs to continue doing this, and the other side has two options. They can try to get a hostage deal done, or the killing of additional terrorists in Gaza will continue. Very simple.
Richard and Marco, both of you have this is your first time on a show since that happened, right? Or maybe you were on a show but we were talking about something else. Anyway, your comments on this and the media's reporting of it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's great news, absolutely, and it's exactly what Israel needs, particularly at this particular juncture as well. It's the boost that's necessary, and of course, as Michael pointed out, he was a key figure in Hamas. He was one of the founding members, and Netanyahu had identified him right from the beginning, together with the other leadership as a target. Now, I think the way the media is spinning this is deeply contradictory in many of the ways they're looking at it. They either present him as a key negotiator and then take the line as if Israel has just assassinated a union leader who was negotiating for and is appalled at the prospect, or they treat him as some figurehead. A totally contradictory line. Treat him as a figurehead within Hamas who didn't really have much influence, but was just there as a face, wasn't really integral to any decisions, and this will make no difference to Hamas. And of course, that both can't be true for a start, and also that overlooks the fact that he was a key figure, a founder of Hamas, and he was, of course, killed within Tehran on the day of the inauguration of the Iranian leader. And in the capital itself, and all of that is significant as well. And of course, the fact that he was a multi-billionaire, and of course, organisations like the BBC and their like are always keen to pillory billionaires who've legitimately earned their wealth any other day of the week. But this particular billionaire. They don't even want to mention the fact he was a billionaire. And certainly, obviously, that runs counter to the starving masses in Gaza and the fact that they've got some beef with the fact that he siphoned off all the humanitarian aid via various means in order to become a billionaire. And of course, where did the funds for all that humanitarian aid come from? Came from all of us taxpayers in the Western world, didn't it? So there's much in there to conceal and hide, and however the media approaches it, that's its intent.
Yeah, if you Google Haniyeh and his money, Google will come up with a nice little paragraph and will tell you that the money was earned by from his salary as a role of Hamas leadership and some financial transaction. It's like, really? No, really. It's like saying I'm rich because I put money in the bank. It's like, but anyway, the media have especially the pro-Hamas and anti-Israel media, have received a kind of a few blows this week. The death of Nasrallah #2 in Beirut, confirmed the death of Dave, and of course Haniyeh death in Tehran. So they are probably not. They can't believe how bad the week has been for them. They're probably trying to find a narrative where they can spin these events as good, but they realize that actually it's actually bad. And the whole reaction, this kind of disappointment where they don't really talk about it, but they have mentioned because they have to mention it, otherwise they're going to be accused of ignoring it. But imagine if Ukraine had taken out Medvedev, Putin's #2. Imagine the kind of cheerleaders and the kind of headlines they would have done. But in this case, because it's a massive score for Israel, no, we don't talk about it. We just show a picture of Palestinian women asking for food. So, but also the way they present it, as Richard pointed out, is presented as either somebody who's not really important, so Israel hasn't really done anything important, or somebody who's candle there, but not really the guy behind the whole machine. It also betrays this kind of pragmatism, which is praised by the media. The man was so willing to negotiate, and he was one of us, especially in a week where the leader of the free world has been doing deals with people who caused 9/11 and with Russia during a war by releasing prisoners. This is seen by the media as a bonus, as something that more leaders should do. They are quite confused by what they are betraying. This kind of praise for pragmatism and this praise for negotiation, even with dictators like Putin and Hamas, is quite frightening right now.
Yeah, I mean it's again it's interesting that people didn't mention the fact that he's a billionaire. Netanyahu is in trouble in Israel and has been for a while for some corruption allegations, gifts he gets and stuff like that. And there's a lot of talk about him trying to escape justice in different ways. The difference is, first of all, this is talked about, and like there's a mechanism in Israel which if Netanyahu is found guilty, he will pay for it in some way. But the media loves to talk about that. They don't mention Haniyeh and how he became a billionaire because there are no mechanisms in the Palestinian society for dealing with corruption. And yeah, again, the fact that he was called a moderate, I believe the BBC called him a moderate. I hate it when we talk about stuff that ends up with me sounding like I'm defending Netanyahu, but it's important to look at this in this context. Can you imagine any media outlet referring to Netanyahu as a moderate? And in a sense, Netanyahu, at least in the way he's fighting a war, is kind of a moderate. He's kind of in the middle between, complete surrender and doing what needs to be done. So Netanyahu is absolutely a moderate in that sense, but you will never ever see. I mean, and there will be such uproar in the UK if the BBC was actually somehow decided to refer to Netanyahu as a moderate. But when it's this savage who, by the way, on October 7th, one of the first things we saw was him in his hotel room or wherever it was in Qatar celebrating and doing a celebration prayer while he's watching the videos of Hamas of his soldiers doing what they were doing. And, we need to remember that. We need to hold these people accountable when they pretend to report to us the news and give it to us in this form of saying that kind of savagery, that kind of the biggest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust is what a moderate does. We need to remember that, especially when it's something like the BBC, which we are, as we often mention on the show, forced to pay for. Yeah, Michael.
Well, the Wall Street Journal also had similar kind of headline, of course, written by a Muslim or at least an Arab, at least somebody with an Arab name as the first author, and I'm pretty sure the last author as well. It was a disgraceful article, and I think even at one point it sort of said that Israel claims that 1,200 people were killed, and so on and so forth. It also put in that, Israel claims some other stuff, which even the UN, I think the Israel claimed that Hezbollah shot the missile that killed the kids in the north. And this isn't Israel claims. This is a fact. Even the UN, which is wildly anti-Semitic and certainly anti-Israel, even they agreed that this was a missile that came from Hezbollah. The fact that it was made by Iran and made in Iran, and that was a fact from day one, that again is glossed over. This morally, a lot of this starts at a foundation, it seems to me, as moral equivalency, which really began with Barack Obama, as far as I can tell. When Ronald Reagan went head to head against the Soviet Union in the Cold War, he didn't give the Soviet Union $500 billion to stop doing what it was doing. He actually did the opposite. He tried to strangle them economically, and he outspent them militarily. And eventually, Gorbachev had the heroism, I think, but also I think the realism to break up this one of the most despicable and destructive organizations ever put together on Earth, namely the USSR, which, of course, Vladimir Putin wants to reconstitute. But we didn't do moral relativism back then. It is arguable that our response in America to 9/11 started to get to moral relativism because there was a growing sense in the US taught by our universities and so on, that if someone was angry enough to fly planes into your buildings, surely they must have a reason. And surely they must have a legitimate gripe. Maybe I can disagree a little bit on the mechanism used to voice that gripe, but there must be some validity to their position. Culminating with Barack Obama, who said, "Thank you very much to Tehran. Here's $500 billion. By the way, you can sort of start selling your oil again. And by the way, we're going to check your we're going to check all of your centrifuges," which everybody with half a brain knows is unenforceable in a country, especially one the size of Iran. And it turns out, lo and behold, as Israel uncovered some years later, that Iran was in vast violation of that agreement with enrichment and so on and so forth over time. And of course, that again is not talked about. So Obama started this whole thing where everybody who has a gripe, and no matter what anybody does, it's okay. And by the way, this has now found its way into local law enforcement, where criminals who steal stuff, well, we shouldn't really prosecute, robbery and burglary, because surely the criminals must need some of this stuff if they've gone that far. We got to get back to some simple truths. And that is that Iran has contributed nothing to the world except for evil. They are the largest sponsor of state terrorism in the world. Just like you would never do a deal, I hope, with North Korea, you would certainly never give them money. Why would you ever do a deal with Iran? And unfortunately, you have Blinken and Biden saying that we have to deal with Iran with diplomacy. So none of this is surprising to me. The media is colluding with this attitude and this notion that, the other side had some real legitimate claims, and he was just a leader, and They thought that things had gotten so bad, and especially if Israel did a deal with Saudi Arabia, that we better go murder 1,200 Israelis and take 250 hostages. That's he's a moderate guy, and that's where the media is coming from, and we continue to put up with it. We continue to watch these shows, even in America. Read the Wall Street Journal paper. I found even worse. And they're always hammering people that are even, if someone sells their stock at the wrong time and makes a few extra dollars, they're all over it, which is fine. That's against the law. But a billionaire like this, who's a murderer and a terrorist, and he's a moderate, no.
Michael, since you mentioned 9/11, I will repeat my recommendation to people to look up, it's on YouTube, or at least used to be on YouTube, the BBC Question Time. BBC Question Time is like the flagship political panel show once a week on the BBC. Look up the one from September 13th, 2001. It is absolutely shocking. It's featuring the American ambassador to the UK and an audience that one by one basically ask him questions to the effect of, why did you do all the things you did that made these poor innocent victims react in the way they did on 9/11. And that tells you, BBC Question Time has an audience that is picked by the BBC. You're asked a bunch of questions about your views in advance. Some of the questions you had to submit in advance. And of course the panel is chosen. And it really is telling, and it's a long time ago, but things haven't gotten better since then. All right, I'll go to the super chats soon, but Richard.
Yeah, and that is that mysterious way in which the BBC managed to pick their impartial audience all the time in order to bolster and suit their own narrative and agenda, no matter what the issue on discussion at the on the front is. I think one of the things about Haniyeh that is relevant is the fact that he was sort of the public face, that he was the guy wearing the suit with the smile. He was with a neatly trimmed beard. He could teach a few beard wearers about beard trimming, but one of the things I wanted to make was this phony distinction that is made all the time in coverage of this between the political and the military wing of Hamas, as if they operate in two utterly different spheres and disagree with each other somehow. That's the implicit implication. When you see Haniyeh on October 7th, and in all of his rhetoric when he's speaking Arabic, then you clearly see that he's well and truly and squarely in the destruction of Israel camp, the pro-destruction of Israel camp. So the idea that he is somehow different is utterly wrong, and this distinction is utterly wrong. As if you separate out the governing of a region in the same way you have a government in a Western country with its military terrorists that occur within its borders. I mean, it's really stupid. And of course, it's no wonder that organizations like the BBC call him a moderate, because their anti-Semitism is so woven into their narrative, they don't recognize the rhetoric that is there. They don't see what's there. I mean, the BBC, I think today or yesterday, received a letter from over 200 people working in the TV and film industry, criticizing them for their coverage, for their anti-Israel coverage, and the fact that they weren't taking these legitimate calls that the BBC is anti-Semitic seriously, in a quoting "the Jews don't count," as the title of the letter has come to be known as. So I mean, clearly that's a major problem, so their attitudes to this is also affected by pragmatism themselves, because they're always trying to find some pragmatic middle ground person who isn't Sinwar, but is somebody who is slightly different. Oh, we'll go with him. We'll pretend that he is somehow a better individual. Whereas the pragmatism that's shown by Haniyeh himself is the pragmatism of spending time in 5-star hotels and not living in the dangerous area of Qatar for the sake of pragmatically preserving his own life. And thank goodness it's ended.
And of course, a pragmatist is somebody who doesn't have a principle which directs his own actions. So every event is met with some response which comes from whatever it's handy at the moment. It's like when you have a crying baby, you don't teach them stop crying in the long term, you're not gonna get what you want, but you just stuff a bottle, a dummy or a bottle in the mouth so they shut up. That's pragmatism. That's acting in the short term, which inevitably in the long term causes more and more problems. But the main problem here is that the media see Haniyeh as a pragmatist because he was involved in the ceasefire negotiation without considering the fact that, of course, he would be on the side of ceasefire because a ceasefire would only embolden Hamas. A ceasefire only embolden Russia. The only people who have something to gain from a ceasefire and from negotiation are the faulty party, the morally repellent people who try to be seen as put on the same equivalency as the people, as the victim, the fact that the people that they've been bullying, the people that have been attacking, the people that have been murdering. So by accepting and pushing for a ceasefire, they're automatically seen as people who actually they want peace. They're nice, they're good people. You should sit down, totally ignoring what the actual actions are. And what's particularly repellent is that negotiating with these people not only give them a legitimacy of, give legitimacy to a dictator and murderers like Hamas and all the Islamic people behind them, but also effectively sets up a sort of trade, a human trade. Humans become a currency which are exchanged. And of course, the victim, in this case Israel, when they return Palestinian terrorists which were held in the jails, effectively force themselves to lose. They go back to the point before where they capture these people. Effectively, they roll back time, roll back their advancement and victory in order to make the other side, Hamas, win. Hamas gets the prisoner, the terrorists that have left their ranks because they've been captured by Israel, and they gain them. They are the net gainer from this. They go into Israel, they take more and more human currency, and they perpetrate this trade every time Israel sits down at the table with them and agrees terms with them. There's no way you can have any sort of negotiation with people like that. Just go to Khamenei, the leader of Iran's X account. Just look at the kind of anti-Semitic, horrifically racist posts he puts out there in order to arise hate and foment violence all across the world against the Jews and against every civilized nation. Just read his words and tell me, how can you negotiate with people like that who state their position very clear, which is, we'll destroy you? How can you sit down at a table and talk to them?
X often recommends to me Khamenei's X account, and when I see his posts, many of them could have been written by some BBC journalist. Thank you, Laurisetto, for the super chat. Laurisetto says, but Razi, don't you know that moderate depends on the context? LOL, non-troll super chat. Yes, just like anti-Semitism depends on the context, as we have learned from America's finest higher education leaders. Thank you, Tom, for being a member of the YouTube channel for 25 months. Tom says, if the Islamic Republic of Iran vetted him, that's good enough for the Western mainstream media. Billionaires are only bad here, can't judge non-white cultures. Thank you, Apollo Zeus, for gifting an Ayn Rand Center UK YouTube membership. Best Monster, I will try to answer your question at some point, maybe today. Oh, and I should say, if you haven't already subscribed to our Substack, The first article is there by Marco. You can go subscribe. You get to see the first 2 paragraphs, and then if you subscribe for the paid Substack, you get to see the rest. And if you are an Inner Circle YouTube member or a member through the website at Gold, Platinum, Reardon Metal, or Midas Mulligan levels, you get that for free. You need to subscribe for free, and then we will comp you the paid subscription. All right, anything else we want to sell, or do we want to go back to the topic? Yes, let's go back to the topic, but I had something to say and I don't remember what it was. So Michael, I will go to you.
Yeah, I think going back to this moderate notion. So if you do the simple thing of replacing the word terrorist with cancer, and ask yourself if you would leave cancer, moderate cancer, in your body to fester. It could be on your border also. If cancer were contagious, we could use that, but it's not. So we'll keep it in our body. So we'll call the body the Middle East, and there are cancers surrounding Israel, multiple lesions. Most of them are aggressive cancers that are going to kill you in the next 6 months. They would wipe you out tomorrow. It's just they don't. You do put up a little bit of a defense, which human beings tend to against cancer anyway. But ultimately, the cancers always win, unless there's only one cure for cancer, and that's eradicate them. Typically with surgery, you cut them out and you annihilate them. And then occasionally we win for some cancers like lymphoma, in most cases of testicular cancer, we can drop chemical bombs on them or immunotherapy on them and eradicate them that way. But basically the bottom line is, I don't know too many patients who elected to keep their moderate cancers in their bodies. I don't know anyone who wanted to keep an aggressive cancer in their body. Occasionally you'll get a very, very old person who might say it's a low-grade, so-called slowly advancing cancer. If I'm 85 years old and it's probably not going to get me for 10 years, I might not want to go through surgery, especially if it's a risk. But I make this point on purpose because the world has gotten absurd. The world has gotten to the point where they think we're talking about cholesterol levels. And these people are all kind of benign, like we'll have time to deal with this. And that's the trouble with ticking time bombs like cancer. You never know when that cell is going to leave the original tumor and go off and blow your brain up, land in your brain and make a big lesion there. And you wake up one morning with a massive stroke because there's a cancer growing in your brain. And that's the way the world is behaving. One other point I just make is I found ironic today of all days is that Turkey, which has become more and more anti-Semitic under Erdogan and a dictatorship and a despicable place, really, and a member of NATO and supposedly is slowing down NATO's support for Israel, which is only the U.S. could allow. Only the U.S. administration currently could allow such a thing to happen to NATO, where we pay for most of it. But they rounded up 95 ISIS members, or alleged ISIS members. Let me make sure we correct that because we're dealing with Western journalism here. So they rounded up a bunch of Islamic militants who want to kill people in Turkey. That was okay. But when Israel rounds up and kills Islamic militants, it's not okay. So I think it's really important for all of us to understand the level of hypocrisy that goes on in the world and also the way it's portrayed by the Western media.
Richard.
Did you say my name then, Razi? I'll
Yes,
go on.
I may have said it while still muted. I never know, but yeah, Richard.
Oh, okay. No worries. Well, just on the subject of Haniyeh, I mentioned earlier that he was a founding member of Hamas. And of course, that's around the time that Hamas would have written its charter, isn't it? And we know what's in the Hamas original version of the charter. It's been altered slightly since, but the intent is still there. The original version is super explicit about killing the Jews. So, to pretend he's somehow a moderate, a pragmatist, different from the rest, is patent nonsense. I think one of the things I wanted to mention was that the pragmatism runs very deep, all over the place. Even, for example, the fact that the EU managed to send their official, an official to attend the Iran inauguration, at which Haniyeh was also present. It's a shame that that particular inauguration wasn't bombed to oblivion, because that would have taken out quite a few evil people in the process, possibly including Enrique Mora. Not saying he's on the same level, but the fact that he's attending is certainly condoning that kind of level. He's the Deputy Secretary General of the European External Action Service, which is the diplomatic branch of the EU. Now, really, should he have been there? And what does that tell you about the attitude of the EU to Iran? And of course, we see that all the time, but particularly when the EU is negotiating with the US and Iran to determine what level of sanctions, etc., are necessary to prevent them acquiring nuclear weapons instead of bombing the facilities into oblivion before they can get anywhere close, which would be the only way to safely ensure that that such an outcome is achieved. I think there's a lot of talk about escalation at the moment. There's a talk about escalation in terms of retaliation from Iran to Israel and concern in Israel about that. And obviously the new, again, he's also called a moderate, but he was appointed, sanctioned by the Iranian leadership before being able to even stand for elections. But the new Iranian president, we're going to see how moderate he is pretty soon. And of course, there's also a concern within Iran itself. And this is where there is positive news to be sought, or at least considered, which is the many people in Iran who hate the regime that they are living under and have been protesting against repeatedly ever since the Iranian morality police, of the case of Masha Amini, the young Kurdish woman who was killed by the morality police, and all the protests that resulted from that in 2022. There's a lot of unrest within Iran. There's a lot of people who would also be concerned about an escalation and the potential for wider war to be reached from within Iran. And the new leadership is going to be aware of that as well. So I think to treat all of the concern about escalation as being solely within Israel's borders is to miss the point. And this is the extra benefits of killing someone like Haniyeh within Tehran, is you're demonstrating not only your military capability within an extremely difficult setting, you're putting all of his successors in the spotlight, and you're making them consider whether their lives could be ended anytime they step into a shower or out of a car or into one, or get in a helicopter or a private jet. And of course, there's the morale effect on the wider population, and the fact that this is a clear win for Israel at a time when Israel needs it, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, that's going to be understood within Iran, and that is going to affect the morale within the Iranian people and damage it, hopefully. And of course, the morale within Hamas and within the people in Gaza, who suddenly realize that their leadership is not as invulnerable as they perhaps thought they were, and therefore perhaps that they should consider shopping some of the people within their own cities who they know are holding hostages, pass on information to Israel, end this conflict swiftly, and make sure that they can return to peaceful lives.
For a while, we thought in the West we managed to get rid of the anti-Semitism, which has been plagued really the Western world for millennia. But despite it looking for the last couple of decades like this thing was finally defeated, we suddenly realized that by importing lots of people whose culture is founding on the destruction of Israel, actually we find out that anti-Semitism was actually defeated. It was just not acceptable to show yourself as an anti-Semite. And now all these kind of protests, all these kind of events have emboldened them again. So they no longer feel that they have to stay hidden and still hate the Jews from a distance. They can actually come out and declare themselves as such by pretending to support the other side, the side of the poor people occupied, the poor people who are kept in prison, and using all this kind of stupid, emotive statement, which really don't have any representation in reality. If you looked at the facts, if you look how these people behave, the fact that they can come and go, the fact that they have this refugee status that make them effectively, holier than holy, and they can do what they want, they can get what they want. And even the UN, just look at the UN when Richard pointed out the president of the EU representative in Tehran. Well, the UN stood for a moment of silence when Raisi, the butcher of Tehran, died in a lucky accident. So the kind of anti-Semitism is coming out. It's such a wall, such a tsunami that personally I was unprepared for this. I was hoping that the world in 2024 would be a much better one, but this kind of hate is just is beyond precedent. We are probably way beyond the level that probably in the 1930s was present, because at least it was localized in an area. Now the whole world seems to have sucked up to the narrative of the Palestinian, and every single civilization, Islamic based, of course, Islamic fueled, that wants the destruction of Israel.
Yeah. Thank you, Ari, for the super chat. I always appreciate the super chats, especially Ari, when ones like these come at the beginning of when I go to all my co-panelists and have time to think, do I really want to read this out loud? And I'm still not sure I do, but I will anyway. Ari says, Haniyeh looked like an overly successful porn star. Maybe Candy Ass Owens was involved. Razimallahu Akbar. Yeah, the use of my name has become a thing now in Ari's super chats, and I think I appreciate it, but I'll have to think about it some more. Thank you, Apollo Zeus, for gifting another Ayn Rand Center UK membership, and thank you, Christopher, for the super chat. One thing I was hearing, to me, one of the most impressive things about this operation is the fact that it happened in Tehran, and the fact that we heard three versions of how this happened. The first one was it was from a plane outside of Iranian airspace shot a missile, and the second one was from a building nearby, and then the third one was from a bomb planted like 2 months in advance. All of these are super impressive, and the same thing with the Shuker in Beirut, going to his to see his extramarital affair partner and getting killed there. It's beautiful, but there's something I hear from Israelis, which is, yeah, well, we couldn't have done it in Qatar, where he is all the time. And to me, there's like, there's a context there. Yes, we couldn't have done it in Qatar within a certain context. Let's question that context. Why can't we do it in Qatar? Because Qatar is the mediator in the negotiations. That begs several questions. I mean, like, why is Qatar the mediator in the negotiations? And why are there negotiations with these savages in the first place? But none of those questions are really a part of that conversation. We get to that point, and it is a fact that Qatar are partners somehow in a negotiation. Yeah, should we watch the video? This is from Eylon Levy's ex. Eylon Levy, some of you will remember, was the Israeli spokesperson in English who got fired for being too pro-Israel. We did a show about that when he got fired. Yeah, this is a video of Haniyeh's most moderate moments.
هذا الانتصار الذي جرى في 7 أكتوبر يجب أن نمسك به ونبني عليه ونراكم عليه. هناك جهاد البيان وجهاد اللسان. نعم، آن الأوان لجهاد السنان.
يتحرك الشعب الفلسطيني الحر في كل الساحات، في الأردن وسوريا ولبنان، إلى تصعيد المواجهة لوقف هذا العدوان الغاشم.
فلسطين من البحر إلى النهر، ولن نعترف بإسرائيل.
لنا دماء الأطفال والنساء والشيوخ، بل نحن الذين نحتاج هذه الدماء لكي توقظ فينا روح الثورة.
Yeah, by the way, Elon Levy, as you can see, got that from memory. Memory is fantastic. It is where you can see videos from the Arab world where they think nobody can hear it or know what they're saying if they don't speak Arabic, and they translate it. So that is very good. But yeah, watching that, I think, you know what? Maybe they're not wrong. He is a moderate in the sense that among Palestinian society, that's pretty, center. I don't know what left and right.
Mainstream.
Yeah, but
Mainstream.
it is
Yeah.
mainstream. It's so yeah, Michael.
Well, let's not forget that lovely Joe Biden said that killing Haniyeh was unhelpful to the hostage negotiation. Now, that's a very interesting view, because the leader of the free world just said it was unhelpful for the side that's winning, who has agreed to several different ridiculous, in my opinion, ridiculous ceasefires, but Israel has agreed in many of them, just like Israel agreed to some of the various two-state solutions in the past, where, of course, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas only want a one-state solution from the river to the sea, as was just said. But Biden said that this was unhelpful. So let me state that I think that Biden is completely wrong. I think it could be very helpful. And if you continuously pick off the heads of this serpent, yeah, they might grow some back, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean you don't keep picking them off. You don't give up because it's a difficult task. And anybody with any rationale, even terrorists, if they're rational, they will enter into a ceasefire right now, because Israel, I hope, has crossed to a different place now with those 12 kids having to be murdered in order for Netanyahu to grow a pair, pardon the term, and get a backbone and do something real, or allow his IDF to do something. And that is to say that if I were on the other side, I'd be damn worried that I'm going to end one day very quickly. My life is going to end if I'm a terrorist on the other side. And now is not the time to show how amazing you are. And it might be time to back off for the moment, so you can plan the next October 7th, which is exactly what Haniyeh was saying, this moderate Haniyeh was saying. So the problem with Blinken and Biden, and as leaders, as Biden is the leader of the free world, is that people are mostly afraid, and they will follow the leadership. This is why nobody screams about Putin. This is why the news, the amazing news, acted like the prisoner swap between Russia and the US was somehow morally equivalent, because surely our team must have gotten their people in this, who were probably really good people over here, because we and Russia are basically no different. Now, in Russia, of course, if your government is bad, in Russia you die, or you get taken away to secret prison. The fact is, in America, you're allowed to say stupid stuff like that and put up this moral equivalency stuff. But it goes back to the fact that our leadership in the West has failed. The current leadership leading the Western world has allowed this moral equivalency to devolve, where what we have is now civilization versus barbarism. You just saw a bunch of videos from a leader who has contributed nothing good to the entire world ever. And the people that he is leading, and most of them, who are Hamas terrorists and Hamas sympathizers, have done nothing but spread chaos. They are cancer, like we said earlier. And yet somehow the Western world has put them on a moral equivalence with the West, with us, who have had more flourishing people and more advances in technology and lifespan and education and people reaching their potential than ever in the history of the universe, as far as we can tell. It is nuts. And until we switch that, until we stop allowing the quote leadership and the so-called experts and the professors, which should all be used with small letters now and put in quotes, we are going to continue with this absurdity, which is what's going on.
Richard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, as the meme go, you're using moderate, you're using the word wrong. I mean, yeah, you are, aren't you? I mean, even if you take Razi's point about it being mainstream within Gaza, but the BBC don't take the moderate view within Israel and repeat it as though it's you know, a moderate view, do they? They don't treat Israel's government as legitimately elected and representing the people of Israel, but they treat Hamas as having a legitimate government, despite the fact it's denied elections for well over 10 years, and that's an evident distinction. Now they call him moderate because they semi-agree with him, at least to some extent, some level, implicitly. I've certainly heard the argument in a number of articles that the US would not allow Israel to strike against Haniyeh on Qatari soil. Now, I have no idea whether that's true or not, and whether this made a difference. The US have certainly distanced themselves quickly from having any involvement in this in the death of Haniyeh, and but I just mentioned that in passing. Of course, we saw Haniyeh at the inauguration of the Iranian president holding up the V symbol, the victory symbol. Now, I doubt the EU guy was stupid enough to do that whilst he was there, but Haniyeh was certainly filmed doing it, and of course, that is the big finger to the civilized world at the same time, because Hamas is a proscribed genocidal terrorist group, and a political wing of a proscribed genocidal terrorist group is still proscribed genocidal terrorists, in my view. And of course, what's Iran doing? What's the Iranian government doing? They're using all of the Western tools against the West. Well, once again, they already said that they want to raise the issue in the UN and complain about the violation of their sovereignty at the UN Security Council for the fact that he was killed on Iranian soil, ignoring the fact, of course, that Iran itself, not only does it attack Israel all the time through its proxies, but also send over 200 rockets and drones a mere matter of weeks ago to violate the sovereignty of Israel directly, even if you wanted a specific incidence of it being done. So, the hypocrisy and the use of the West morality against itself is written through all of this.
Yeah, I mean, a modern Palestinian, a modern Gazan is somebody who promises you to kill you, but then send somebody else to blow himself up and kill children and slaughter all sorts of people. The attitude of the West, I mean, to be honest, why wouldn't they do that? The West is telling Israel, don't defend yourself, don't kill your enemies. The stupid statement that the death of this monster throws off the rails the negotiation is just unbelievably short-sighted. To say that, you effectively say, apart from the fact that you negate the previous statement that said that Israel has got the right to defend itself, made immediately after October 7th, comes across as, go ahead, any bull in the world, please come over. If you want to take a few hostages, we will capitulate, we'll sit at the table, we'll give you whatever you want. Please take advantage of us. We haven't got any self-esteem, any self-confidence that our civilization is better than yours. So please come and pillage. The doors are open for you. And this, just look at what your friend Turkey did. They flew the they flew the flag at half mast in the embassy in Israel. If that's not a slap in the face of all the 1,000 people and their hostages, which are still held by their friends in Gaza, you tell me what. And of course, Qatar, yeah, the EU on October 7th were in Qatar trying to get some cheap gas for their stupid non-nuclear and zero Green Deal free emission crap. So of course they're not going to come out on the side of Israel. Of course they're going to suck up to every single dictator in the land, because they've leave themselves to them. They follow the kind of policies that effectively is leading you off the cliff, and they are just going for it.
Yeah, just Turkey lowering the flag to half-mast in their embassy in Israel. First of all, really the shocking thing about that is, why does Turkey still have an embassy in Israel? Why have they not kicked out the ambassador? And of course, the ambassador, was called to be reprimanded or something. Yeah, not good enough. At the very least, Israel should tone down diplomatic relations, if not cut them off completely. Thank you, Ari, for another super chat. Ari says, I have a moderate beard, so I'm a moderate. Yeah, I believe it was Barry Goldwater who said moderation in the pursuit of beards is no vice. And thank you, Crusader General, for the super chat. Crusader General says, on one hand, it's amazing how a 7th century freak became an eternal leader of now 2 billion dummies who are now the global aristocracy to which the entire Western civilization leadership has surrendered. Yes, now in part it's well, actually there's another super chat by Crusader General. Thank you for that as well. Then Crusader General says, but on the other hand, it is in line with the inherent cowardice, corruption, and futility of humanity that has proved Islam to be the most successful experiment in such. Well, I would blame, the more fundamental kind of approach of mysticism, which is not a part of humanity. It's you have free will and you can choose to look to reality, or you can choose to look to your imagination or to the imagination of others and follow whatever they come up with. And I think that, unfortunately, is what is being done. And that is what we are trying to fight against, which is why we appreciate your super chats, which help with that. And thank you, Alexis, for a super chat. Alexis says, the best way to punish Western media is to not use them. Aside from your channel, what alternatives do you recommend? Oh, I have to think of that off the top of my head. I'm a big fan of Barry Weiss and the Free Press. I think that's an interesting, and it's new. So I would say that. I would also say we are not a news channel. We're a commentary channel. So don't count on us for the news. But but you can count on us to watch the news that you don't want to watch, and then give some commentary on it. Marco, I saw that you had an answer to that as well.
I was going to suggest a briefly objective.
Yes, our sister channel, where you can get more bite-sized content. And Daniel says there's a new video coming out soon. By soon, do you mean in 6 minutes? All right, great. So there is a video there in 6 minutes. Michael, any news channel? Yeah, Enric says the Aaron Brooks show. I recommend that as well. But also, although he does do news, but he's not a news organization, so he reads the news from other organizations like we do. Michael, any news outlets, media outlets? We recommend the Wall Street Journal often here, but as you brought up, now is not exactly a good time considering their coverage of Haniyeh.
No, I don't know that there's any one outfit you can trust. I really think you have to triangulate or quadrangulate, if that's a word, amongst 3 or 4 or 5 news outlets and try to restrict your reading of them to the news part and not the interpretation. You also have to be very, very, unfortunately, increasingly careful about the way things are worded, because the editors of these increasingly absurd, I guess they would call themselves progressive, enlightened folks, is that they love to, they're going to steer you. They're going to spin things subtly and not so subtly along the way. So you really have to try to find out what's going on. And you have to think about, then you have to interpret it. I mean, frankly, it's what we do a lot, and people do in science, engineering, and any other real endeavor in business, et cetera, is you observe data, you report hopefully the data, and it's getting harder and harder to find people who just report the news, just actually what happened, the Walter Cronkite kind of just, this is going on. And then you have to convert that into information and then knowledge. So we increasingly, unfortunately, cannot rely on any of these standard news channels to be honest and put things into a perspective. You really got to think for yourself.
Richard, any recommendations?
No specific ones that haven't been already mentioned, other than just I think you do need a broad viewership, and I do think you do need to also read those that you disagree with to see how they're manipulating people and understand the ways in which they are shaping the narrative, even if you strongly disagree with it. And one of the things to look out for in that, as I hope we point out on many of these shows, including this particular episode, is some of the omissions from the articles, some of the things they don't say, which are flagrantly omitted from the content. So I think that would be my main suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, you got ways of getting the facts directly from the people that are actually witnessing nowadays. So try and get the source, try and get the person and exactly what they're saying, try and get the clip and make up your mind, and then double check what the various outlets tell you, and you work out which one are more reliable or not.
Yeah, when I open my Google app, it recommends so much stuff from The Guardian because it knows that that's what I read. But now I mostly read The Guardian because it gives me material for shows. But yeah, it is interesting to see how the other half lives in this sense. To the person who doesn't like being called a troll, although some of his comments are pretty trolly, who asks, are Marco and Richard related? They can follow them on Twitter to get an answer to that. Anywhere else where people can find you, Marco and Richard?
Well, you can certainly find us on the Briefly Objective, which we mentioned earlier in terms of some of the videos which we edit from this channel. And of course, as mentioned earlier, Marco's Substack article.
Yeah, that Substack, the link to our Substack will be in the chat. Michael, where can people find you?
Kaufman Michael, 2Fs on LinkedIn.
And I'm Razi Ginsburg on X. Thanks everybody for watching, and we will be back here tomorrow with the Daily Objective, like I said, probably on the topic of Dave Smith. The topic of Dave Smith, he is not going to be on the channel, but Mark Pellegrino will be if that's what's happening. Also, Ayn Rand Center UK members, tomorrow, Marco and Richard are doing a productivity hub. That's a membership benefit that we haven't had for a while. It is on gardening. It is titled
Garden Like Rourke, the principles of garden design. So it's a break from what you're hearing on this channel.
Yeah, and it is also available for YouTube members, including all of you who got gifted memberships today by Apollo Zeus and in recent days. So make sure you tune in to that tomorrow. That is after the Daily Objective, right?
Yeah.
And the Briefly Objective, how Hamas uses numbers for propaganda, starts in a minute. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.